Yay, we made it. Can you believe it? So, welcome everyone. I am really excited that for once we managed to go live, and I'm still hoping to see this pop up. And yes, it's looking good. We are live on Facebook. Can you believe it, Chris? I'm very, very excited. So welcome back, Chris Krupar. We had Chris live with us once before, yet the live streaming didn't work. So I'm super excited that we managed to go live into the group, because I know quite a few people are waiting to see you live. And I actually would love to give people the opportunity to ask questions while we are live. So I keep my phone handy next to me so I can see comments come up. Chris, thank you so much for joining us again. I felt like last time I talked to you, we were running out of time. There was so much more that I wanted to talk to you about. So I'm really, really happy that you came back. Would you do me a favor and introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about Loving Life After and who you are, so we can give them a bit of an impression before we get into the topics we've prepared for today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me back. Yeah, it was a great conversation last time, so yeah. I'm looking forward to continuing it. But yeah, my name is Chris Krupar. I'm here in New Mexico in the United States, and I started a website called lovinglifeafter.com, and it's just an opportunity for me to share my story. There are some blogs on there that are the makings of a book that I'm still wrestling with finishing. But I lost a son to a drug overdose about 4.5 years ago. But before that, I had worked in a number of different religious organizations in a capacity where I had helped other people go through unexpected loss of loved ones, children, husbands, some of them taken to, car accidents, suicide, other overdose situations. And so then navigating through that myself, after helping all those people, to then get the phone call myself and then have to take my turn, navigating through that loss. Early on in that, I realized that I needed to, be mindful in going through it, to approach it from a holistic approach, to allow myself to feel the emotions of it, to allow myself to apply the logic of it all. And so having done that and having, gotten to the other side of that, for me, the natural thing was to try to find a way to share that with others. So I did drag my feet a little bit. The website hasn't been out that long. I tend to overthink things. I want to make sure things are perfect before I, release or publish. But, doing interviews like this, sharing that website, sharing my Facebook page, Love Life After, I do all those things really just to be an available resource to people. These things that we go through in life, events that take place, especially the unexpected loss of loved ones, that when that happens and you're standing there looking at moving forward, it can feel like having to climb a mountain. It might even feel like there you are having to climb Mount Everest. And when you think about the people who, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, like, obviously when you said, you were working and supporting people through that beforehand, I can only imagine that, one part would say that's such a great preparation, if you may say so, when you have to go through something like that yourself. And another part would probably say, well, yeah, but going through it yourself is completely different to supporting others through it. So they're probably both sides to that story.
Yeah. It would be like, fighters, especially like mixed martial art fighters. They do lots and lots of sit-ups in preparation of getting punched in the gut. But when you actually get punched in the gut, you feel it.
Amazing comparison.
You feel it. So all that preparation certainly helped. I was in a much better position had I not been through any of those things, had I not taken the time to do some study, to dedicate myself to, trying to understand our eternal existence and this temporary physical experience that we have, then I would have had to navigate it differently. And again, looking at it as a climb up a mountain, all the great climbers in the world, nobody climbs Everest on their own. They all hire a Sherpa. And the
And
Sherpas
nobody
don't
does
get
it from
any
one day to
credit.
the other without
Right.
preparation. Everybody does a
Exactly.
whole lot of preparation to actually go through that.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I actually want to start off with is,
Mhm.
and you mentioned that in our pre chat when I said, is there anything particular that you'd like to really talk about today? And you said it's society's fixation on the finish line rather than, focusing on the now and how we respond to things. And for me, both of that has got some slowing down and being in the moment in it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think now more than ever, it's so important to really focus on the
Sure.
now and what we have and the responding rather than reacting. And that always requires that pause and that reflecting.
Yeah, having goals is great.
Yeah.
Looking forward to a finish line is fine.
Mm.
But yeah, in society today, I think we get very fixated on that finish line.
Yeah.
And often when we stand in the present moment, if we're looking at something that's going to take quite some time to get to, we can become disheartened to look at
Mm.
something so far away. Again, to go back to that analogy of climbing
Yeah.
Everest, you can stand at the bottom and stare at the top and you may psych yourself out. You got to
Yeah.
look down at the ground in front of you. You got to look out and reach out to that next little crevice that you can, get your hands into, or that next little
Yeah.
foothold.
Yeah.
And so, really, you've got to be able to do both. It's great to have the goal in mind, and especially when we're talking about navigating through loss. And if the goal is to get back to that life that we feel is normal, get back to just living our life, and especially to get back to loving it, when you're standing there, just having gone through that event of losing someone, to fixate on that goal that seems so far away, it can just be too disheartening. And for me,
Yeah.
3 days after I got back from my son's memorial service, I made the choice to go back to work. I
Mm.
looked at my wife and said, I can't just sit here. I need to take a step back towards normal.
Yeah.
And I knew that when I went, I wasn't going to get anything done.
Mm.
But if I just went and sat at my computer and maybe, read a couple of
Yeah.
emails, I was going to take that step back towards normal.
Yeah.
I
It's
couldn't
that
quite
one
get,
step. I love that you
yeah,
say that, because it's all about that one step at a time. And we use
yeah,
that so much, like in all my programs and even in just the Loving Life After a Lost group. It's such such an important tool to just literally take that one step, because for me, it's also this analogy, you can't steer a parked car, and once you're in motion, it's so much easier to navigate rather than just sitting still. And it feels like this complete slow pace, and that might be like a complete rush to you that others see as so slowly. It might be such a speed to you at the same time. So, this whole speed at what you do things completely changes for you when you go through grief. So I think it's really, really amazing that you did that you did go back to work just to see how you go and just take that one step. That's a perfect example, because that sitting still and sitting in it is really quite detrimental. It really
yeah,
kills you when you stay there.
yeah. A real famous quote is from Don Shula. He says that it's the start that stops most people. And that is so
Wow.
true.
Yes.
So many people just stand and stare at that
Mm.
distant goal that seems so difficult that they'll
Yeah.
psych themselves out. They'll never take the first step.
Yeah.
And again, society pushes that so much.
Mm.
You got to get to this goal.
Yeah.
You have to complete this degree. You've got to make this amount of money, and
Yeah.
you have to get there, get there, get there. And I had a conversation once with a gentleman that's a mentor of mine. He's a professional football coach, indoor
Mm.
football, and a great mentor. We were actually doing participating in a native Inibi ritual, which is folks will also refer to as a sweat lodge.
Yeah.
And there was a young man there who ended up having one of the roles in a movie, a famous movie.
Mm.
And I have to apologize, I don't recall the title of the movie, but this young man had landed a role. He'd never been in
Mm.
acting before. He was in it was a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Mm.
And my friend, the coach, was speaking to him, and asked him about what it was like, what it was like to reach that goal, to land
Yeah.
that spot in the movie. And he let the young man talk about it. And he said, but let me ask you this, did you enjoy the journey?
Yeah.
Did you love the journey? And that just really stuck out with me. And I pulled him to the side later and talked to him about that more in detail. And he said, yeah,
Mm.
folks get all excited about, again, getting to that goal,
Yeah.
and they forget to enjoy all the steps that you can take to get there.
Mm.
And finding accomplishment, even if it's not enjoyable. I can't say that going back to work that first
Yeah.
day was enjoyable,
No,
but
obviously
I
not.
allowed
Yeah.
myself to feel the accomplishment of
Mm.
just going back to work. And that's just so important. There's so
Yeah.
much that we can do in life, so many goals, so many destinies that we can try to reach.
I love that. I
But
cannot just highlight that. I
yeah,
really think that is one of the most important things, that not so much if you enjoy sitting there or not, but allowing yourself to feel the accomplishment that you've
yeah,
actually gone there. That is really, really important. And if you don't mind, I actually want to share something with you that one of our viewers has said to me and said, can you please ask Chris that, because it's really, really important to me. And for her, she has lost her son to suicide as well. So she can relate to a lot of things that you share. And for her, she got so much value out of watching our first interview. And she said to me, it's this whole idea of, she's gone through a lot of healing, and she's done all my courses. She's been in this group for a long time, and she's come so far. I'm really absolutely in awe of her, what she's done, and how she confronted herself with that whole process and really wants to heal and step through that. So I really admire her for that. And she said that navigating back into the real world of people and expectation and opinions, and how do you say yes or no to people? I think it's more like that. How do you say no to people and yes to yourself without feeling guilty? That is her biggest thing, because she feels like she's losing her ground when she comes back into the real world and feels quite confronted with these expectations. So her question to you is, how do you deal with that saying yes to yourself rather than expectations and people, and not feel guilty about it?
so there's different ways. I mean, we certainly have every right to guard and protect.
Mm.
And if we're guarding and protecting nothing else, it's our progress. From the moment that we're impacted by such an event, each
Yeah.
one of those steps that we take and allow ourselves to feel that accomplishment, it's our
Mm.
right to protect that.
Yeah.
But we don't have to defend it in a way where we have to win a debate. We
Mm.
don't have to be eloquent in the debate when
Yeah.
people confront us with different opinions on how they think that we should navigate or get through things. And
Mm.
so each one of those occurrences, each one of those events, when it's somebody that confronts or strongly gives their opinion, we get
Mm-hmm.
lots of those. It's like every other event in life. And what's really important in that is remembering that our life is like a movie.
Mm.
And often we feel like we are in a starring role, but we almost feel like the script is being written for us, and that we,
Mm.
because of society and influences, when an event occurs, we then respond in kind to the typical script that should follow that
Mm.
event. And we forget that we are the director, we are
I
the
love that.
producer of our own
Mm.
movie. And so when the event occurs, if that event is the loss, if it's a strong-willed person trying to push their opinion on us, then we have to just step back and remember it's our movie,
Yeah.
and that we are in control of the script, and
Mm.
we're in control of how we move forward. And often you just really need to be that honest with people to say, this is my situation, and I need to navigate through this the best that I know how.
Yeah.
As long as people were being kind, and even if they were being a little forceful in their opinions,
Mm.
I would thank people for their opinions, but just let them know that I really need to get through this on my own. I need to do
Yeah.
this my way.
Or even on your own
Some,
terms. Sometimes it's
yes,
not even that going through it on your own, but on your own terms, which very
yes,
often might not include them, but maybe other
exactly.
people that are more supportive.
Yeah. I think
That's
last time we talked, I might have shared, somebody had got on Facebook and wrote a real long message to me.
Yeah.
after she'd found out that my son had passed, and gave me a whole lot of advice. And some of that advice was not to underestimate the physiological effects of this, that my limbic brain system was going to kick in, and I was going
Wow.
to be battling with, biophysics and all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and that I need to go see a doctor, and that ultimately
Oh,
she saw
gosh.
no way you could get through the loss of a child without getting on medicine. But then she
Yes.
went on to warn me that she ended up getting addicted to the medicine and had
Oh
to
my
be
God.
weaned off. And I'm listening to this advice, and I said, well,
Take it, but
thank
don't take it, because it will make you addictive. It's like,
yeah, I'm like,
yeah.
yes, thank you for your well-meant advice, but but see, at that, for me, I said this before, I'll say it again. I will never discourage anybody from seeking professional help.
Mm,
And if that leads you to needing some sort of medication to get through a traumatic event, I would never advise against that. I am
yeah.
not a physician. I'm
Yeah.
just a person who's been through something, but I chose to go through it raw.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel all of it.
Mm,
I didn't want to take anything.
yeah.
And at that point, I really didn't want to talk to anybody. I
Yeah.
just wanted to step through it holistically, feel it
Mm,
emotionally, experience it logically. And I just very kindly thanked people for their advice and then went about my way.
yeah.
We should never
It,
feel like we're cornered by people
yeah.
giving us advice. We can always
That's
step
exactly
around
it.
and keep
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, because so many people actually literally well meant, but bombard you with their advice or
Yeah.
their own experience or expectation of what's to come. And I was quite similar to you, that I literally put a stop to all of them and said, this is, I mean, thanks, but no thanks. This is my way of doing it. And it also requires a certain amount, and I'd say a huge amount of strength, to choose that path and say, you know what, I want to feel it all and I want to go through it by myself. And I have shared that many times before, and I think I might have even shared it in our first interview together, when I came to the point where I had a nervous breakdown and I knew that I did need help from outside. And when I did that, I talked to a positive psychologist for about 4 months, and we had probably, I don't know, 6 to 7 sessions in those 4 months. And for me, that was huge, because it was like a fast forward in my healing process. It was this getting reflected things back that I couldn't see from the outside perspective that helped me so much. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Everybody needs something different. For me, that was absolutely, absolutely needed for my healing journey. I don't know where I would have been if I wouldn't have gotten that help. So it was like a fork in the road, like where I had to make my decision, and I was really quite concerned about reliving that at some stage. It scared me because it was such an out of body experience. It was like I was watching myself from the outside when I collapsed on the kitchen floor screaming. And I'm like, I don't want that to happen again. In particular, I didn't want my kids to have to experience that again. And I just knew I had to do something about it. But going through that on your own, as you said, like really raw and feeling it all, I can so see the benefit in that as well, if you have the strength to do it, and you obviously did. So it's really, really amazing. Um, we also talked about this concept of, um, breaking life events down in certain segments to be able to deal with that. And I think that's a perfect time to actually go through that
Sure.
topic. Maybe can you share a little bit about that, how you did that or what that meant for you?
Well, yeah, because that's going to apply to really anything in life.
Yeah.
We as a culture have become people that tend to, um, you know, walk through experiences and where that we take a couple of selfies
Mm,
and we post some selfies of an event in our life, and we move on and we move to the
mm,
next thing and the next thing and the
yeah.
next thing. And I think we're even aware of it. I don't think it's anything that we have to really
Yeah.
expand upon. I think we
Yeah.
realize as a people how quickly we move through things. We
Yeah.
don't stop to smell the roses, and
Yeah.
we know we miss some details.
Yeah.
But in those details are the beauty of everything.
Mhm.
It's the beauty of the experience of life, the beauty of experience of now.
Mm,
On my website, I have some different blogs that I have written, and one of them is titled Hiking Access Only. I
mhm.
was on a ski trip. I did a little skiing, made my way to the top of the mountain, and I looked over to the right and noticed a little handwritten sign with an arrow that said hiking access only.
Yeah.
And I looked at that at first and thought, I very quickly came up with a whole bunch of reasons why I'm not going to get involved in whatever that is. That take up too much of my day. I don't know what that is. And then I ski down the back of the hill. Well, I decided to make my way to the top again, and I saw that sign again. And that time I decided to slow down for a minute. Right. And I stopped and I thought to myself, wait a minute. Why did you look at that sign before and immediately dismiss it? What was the hang up? And I looked off in the distance, and I could see this big, beautiful open face that looked like a great place to ski down. And I can tell by the direction of the path that it must lead to that, right? And I saw some footprints, so obviously other people had made it. And I started to break it down. And I thought, okay, well, let's say I pop my skis off and I start taking this hike. I may find that I'm too tired. I was going to be hiking at 12,000 feet elevation. I might get tired and I just turn around and come back down. And so I gave myself a lot of reasons to go ahead and do this, right? And I was only able to do that because I slowed down and I broke the moment down. Now, it's great practice to do that with events that took place in the past. And as I write about an event like that, well, gee, I can break it down far more now. And that's really the practice in that, in slowing things down and breaking down the events of your life. You start with looking at events of the past. You break them down, write about it, write about things that took place. How could I have reacted different? What are some lessons that I learned? What did I miss?
Yeah.
And then make yourself take that practice and bring it into the present moment. And that's what I did on that ski trip. I just stopped for a minute and I said, now, if I was thinking about this 3 days from now, how would I handle this? And so I took off and I started hiking up the hill. Sure, I was a little tired, but I always notice too, when I'm willing to at least give things a try, they always tend to work out better than all the doubts that I have up front. And sure as shoot, by the time I got to the top, I met somebody. They'd been down before. They showed me a safer way to get down than that big open face that I looked at that turned out to be a sheet of ice. And it was an incredible experience. And I only had it because I slowed down, I broke things down, and I gave myself the opportunity to insert some thought. And that's the practice. When the event in our life is something more significant than a little sign, it's the loss of a loved one, it's a traumatic event, it's some of the things that we're going through now in the current world. When we can just stop and slow things down and break things down and see the opportunities to learn. One of the things we talked about, you had that other interview, and I made a couple of comments on Facebook about how I had that secondary benefit of feeling relief after the feeling of loss of my son, because his life was a difficult one. That relief that one feels when someone passes, but that journey's been difficult for you and them. If we don't break that down, if we don't see it for what it is, if we don't slow down and we just let that go by quickly, that's something that could make us feel guilty. We could feel guilty that we're actually relieved that someone's passed. But that feeling of relief, if you slow down and you break that down for what it is and you think about it, it's actually a beautiful gift. That relief is a shared gift between you and the person that passed, because they needed that relief as well. If their journey was difficult and your journey was difficult, the moment you feel that relief, you're really connecting with them. You're feeling it together. You're relieved.
I feel that when you just say it,
right, because it's been tough for the both of you. And so and that just all goes back to that slowing down and thinking through things.
I want to actually talk about that, because this whole idea of how the relief can be a gift, because there's two things that I talk about a lot as well, and I use that as two different tools actually. One, as you mentioned, is the secondary gain, as in when there is something negative or something that is really weighing us down, like a loss, which is a huge example for that. It is so important to look about, okay, when, for example, I stay stuck in grief, I stay stuck in the suffering, and I don't know how to move, or I don't allow myself to take this one step forward. In the coaching lingo, we call this the secondary gain. What do I get out of not moving? And often we feel like, oh, there's nothing I get out of that. I'm suffering. I'm in pain. This is hurtful. But when you really, as you say, break it down and go like, okay, but there must be some gain in this. Otherwise, you would not do it. It's not just that you're paralyzed and you don't move. You might feel like that. But when you break it down and really look into the essence of what's happening is, well, what you gain from that, very often it's that I feel more peaceful not moving, because when I move, it's too painful, it hurts, and I feel confronted with the pain. So I'd rather stay stuck in it, because then, you know, where there's no friction, there's no heat sort of scenario. And it's really quite fascinating when you allow yourself to look at the secondary gain, as in, what do I get out of not doing this? But there's also a different face to that secondary gain, or a secondary benefit, as you called it, which I absolutely love, because it's not just that, what do I get out of staying stuck in a negative situation and not moving, but it's the what I refer to, the hidden gifts in adversity, you know, that there can also be a sense of relief when somebody ends their suffering, their journey, as in, it was his choice to go. And when you look at it, there's always this, what could I have done? Could I have saved him? Could I have done something? There's so much guilt, or, you know, mother's guilt, father's guilt, whatever you want to call it, as in, could I have done something differently? Yet when you allow to see it from their perspective, as in, it was their choice, and, you know, when we go back to, we're all the director of our own movie, that really has got so much potential. And the potential is not always used for, I want to go on and I want to continue life. It can be used for, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. This is my choice. And as sad as it is, and as traumatic as it is for everybody around that person, for that person, it might be this huge sense of relief, and it might be the only way out that they can see. It is really hard. It is hard. It doesn't even cut it. It's just unbelievable as a parent to have to accept that as their own choice. Yet when you talk about this relief, Chris, I understand that everybody has got such a different scenario in terms of their loss. Like, my husband died very unexpectedly. There was no, oh my God, he was suffering, so for him it was a relief to go. It wasn't. There was no relief in that. Yet it is a huge, huge thing for everyone. And I just had this come up in my last journey that I ran, by two women in there that said there was a sense of relief as well that came with that. And both of them were so relieved when they were allowed to talk about it, because nobody talks about it. It's such a huge, how dare you tell me that there was relief in that? But then when people get to the stage of allowing, and actually really allow that to sink in and go like, oh my God, there was a tiny little sense of relief. And for others, it might be huge sense of relief. It's so individual, but there is always a certain element to that. And this is a huge taboo. Nobody wants to talk about this. But once you allow that, it is one of the gifts, the hidden gifts in adversity. It's just, I really wanted to talk about that in a lot more detail, because nobody allows themselves to talk about this relief, you know, and it does come in various forms. And for some, it's just in tiny little assets of their relationship, for example, where they might feel some sort of sense of relief that XYZ is now not happening anymore in their lives. And for others, that might be huge, you know, but there's always a little sense to that. And of course, you may argue, but why couldn't we save this, or discuss that, or you know, release that differently? Well, of course, it would have been easier, but this is now the scenario, so I may as well allow myself to see that, and not just the loss. Not, you know, I'm always very big about allow everything, you know. You are allowed to have more in your life, or let more in than just the pain, just the suffering, just the grief, just the you know, you are allowed to feel all of it. And that can also include joy and happiness and memories. So, you know, I'd love to hear your take on that.
The relief, it's very different. When you lose someone who has suffered, there's that relief. And I think that one comes a little more quicker. It still catches you off guard, right?
Yeah.
You know, for me, up until the moment that my son passed, I was always waiting for the phone call.
Yeah. Whoops.
And
I need to turn that down because I wanted to
that's
read the comments, and now I can
that's a
hear talk.
tremendous burden for somebody to carry, is waiting for the phone call. And the phone call wasn't necessarily that something had happened to him,
Yeah.
but the phone call was, you know, he wanted money, and I knew there was nothing I
Yeah.
could send him that he
Yeah.
wouldn't take that somehow and turn it into funds to do things that I didn't
Yeah.
want to support, right?
Yeah.
It was just very difficult. It's a tremendous burden. And so that relief comes quickly, but still you meet it with your own opposition. You almost feel guilty, like, oh, I feel terrible, but I actually feel relieved that I'm not waiting for that phone call anymore. But then there's other relief in your instance where somebody passes suddenly. They were living a great life. You were enjoying a great life with them.
Yeah.
There was no suffering or struggling there. But that relief is just in that at some point in the grief, you have a good day. You just go 5 minutes without thinking about it, and you realize, oh, I laughed.
Yeah.
I had a good moment.
Yeah.
And what do I do with that?
Mm.
And people tend to, you know, have different ways of responding to that. And some people
Yeah.
feel guilty. I've had people tell me, oh my God, I felt terrible the first time I had a good day after my loved one passed away. Like I thought to myself, how dare I? You know, one of the inspirations for me writing this book that I hope I'll finish someday was a friend of mine who had lost his child. And he looked at me and said, I've just decided that I will never again for the rest of my life have a good day. I'll just try to do something
Wow.
good in it. And
Yeah.
I just looked at him and said, if your son could speak to you right now, do you believe that he would want that for you? And it broke my heart. And it was a year later that I ended up going through my own loss.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. You know, I just thought, what an outlook, you know, what an
Yeah.
outlook to think that I could never again have a good day. I'll just try to do something good in it. You know, and going back to where you mentioned before, being stuck, you know, there's a thing of being stuck, and there's a thing in the grief process of putting on the brakes and just stopping and not wanting to move, as you said,
Yeah.
because the movement itself causes friction and pain. Being stuck is a sense that you have when you aren't moving and you want to move.
Yeah.
Wherever you're at now, you don't want to be there anymore,
Because
and
otherwise it
you're
would be
looking for a
relaxation
way
if
out,
you
right?
don't want to move.
You're looking for a map
Yeah.
now, but it
Yeah.
is different when you just want to sit. And I had those days too. I didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, the first few days after my son passed was interesting. I would have those bad days and have all those doubts. And I went through all those systematic things. If I'd have called him on this day, this would have happened different, and the ripple effects would have played out differently. And, you know, I did all that to myself, thank goodness, for a brief period of time. And I would finally pass out at night. I would go to sleep and fall asleep from sheer exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I would wake up in the morning. For about 10 seconds, all that I knew was I was waking up, and I felt my first breath, and things felt wonderful. And then I remembered, oh, my son died.
Yeah.
And then it started all over again, right?
Yeah.
And so in that little moment of waking up in the morning, you know, going back to the breaking down thing, you know, I realized that I could find good moments.
Yeah.
And although I was gonna go through this raw, I was gonna feel the emotions, and there were gonna be days when I didn't want to move forward at all, I knew that eventually I could.
Yeah.
And I was gonna find a way to move forward. And it was all
Yeah.
those little steps, going back to work, you know, and going to that retreat that I agreed to go to only 8 weeks after my son had passed, which was a struggle for me. I didn't know if I wanted to be around people.
And it's quite confronting to be amongst people, because the thing is, when you go to a retreat, you just don't know who's going to be there, and you don't know whether they're going to be supportive of your journey or going to bombard you with their expectations or just let you be or support you. There's so many elements to that. And I want to get back to something that you just said, you know, the whole idea of feeling happy again. And I knew in my heart very, very early on, like even I remember the day when Rob passed, and I drove to his parents' place to, you know, share the shocking news with them. And I knew I had to tell them in person. There was no way I wanted to deliver this message over the phone. So I took my kids after I shared it with them, which was hard enough. I drove there, and I remember all these friends and family and neighbors just coming in one by one, and they all went into the kitchen. They all had a drink together. They all, cry together. And I stayed outside in the living room. I just could not be part of that. It was like I was in such a shock state. I just needed to be by myself. And all I did was I was just sitting there watching my kids the whole time. I was scanning them. I was scanning their reactions. I wanted to catch them if they were falling apart. And they did, they went from playing iPad to crying to playing iPad. But I could see this playing iPad was their way of escaping into virtual reality that kept them safe for that small moment. And but what happened, the point that I want to get to was I knew in that moment while I was sitting there that my choice would be happiness, that I needed to do everything I had in my heart, in my power, in my strength to create a happy life for the three of us. Because Rob and I had talked about it. What if something was to happen to one of us? We wanted the other person to find love and happiness again. And I knew, okay, I always thought this was theory. Now it's reality. And now I need to make this happen. This is my calling now. This is my only sole purpose right now in this very moment, step by step, to make them happy. That's as simple and basic as it gets. And then about 2 weeks later, it took quite some time for his body to be repatriated. And then we had the funeral. And I remember standing on stage and delivering this message about love and connection, and that my choice was love and connection and happiness over bitterness and sadness. That's not where I want you to go. I felt such strength in that. I have never in my life spoken to 500 plus people, and I felt such strength standing there delivering this message. And then we went to the wake, and it was such a happy, I almost wanted to call it party. It's not a party, it was a gathering, but it was happy. And I was in such a good state. And thinking back now, there was more connection to Rob in this very moment. I felt so connected. Whenever I felt happy, I felt more connected to him than when I was in grief. And that is the ultimate message that I want to bring across, that in the happiness, in this promise that we made to each other, was the connection, not in the grief, because I knew that's what we wanted for each other and I was living it. And this whole 2-3 hours that I was at the wake, I tried to connect with as many people as possible to touch base and share memories about him. And that's what they all did. They all, had a laugh and shared stories and, shared some memories with me. And it was just really beautiful. And I thought, I was standing there thinking, can you see that, babe? They're all here for you to celebrate your life. And that's what it was. It was a celebration of life, not a wake. And that's what I feel a wake should be, really. So, that was huge. The connection is in the happiness, not in the suffering. So, yeah. So much love here. And we're getting lots of love sent in the comments. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I just recently went through some loss, and my way of navigating through that is different yet again because of all the sum of all experiences that led up to that point. My wife and I decided to foster or adopt 2 dogs, and
Wow.
we're real big dog people. Our dogs are our family. We love them, kiss them, and hug them. And long story, but we rescued a litter of pups and a mother, worked with a local rescue shelter, and decided to bring 2 of them home. Unfortunately, one of them had some physical issues which led to aggression. And so we ended up hiring a professional trainer. She had a degree in behavioral psychology, and we tried to work through this. And all this time we're working through, we have become utterly attached to these dogs. I mean, they are the center of our universe now. And we had to make the decision to take one back to the rescue ranch. In her aggressiveness, she ended up attacking and biting my wife. And we'd even accepted some physical altercations with her up until that point, because we could see the triggers and we knew what we needed to do to avoid that. And we were in this thing, we were committed. But on this occasion, we didn't understand it. It seemed unprovoked. And we knew at that point it was beyond our ability, that
Mm.
and we lost sight of the fact we'd become prisoners in our own home,
Yeah.
managing two dogs, keeping them apart with gates
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
crates and all
Yeah.
this and that. But I had to make that decision to put Roxy in my Jeep and drive her to the ranch and say goodbye.
Yeah.
And, you know, there I was. It was like saying goodbye to a child.
Yeah.
And, you know, the ranch let us know that because of, you know, difficulties with the dog and with us, that we would
Mm.
not be able to go see her, and that she will now be cared for by them until they rehome her.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a different point in my life, I would have been devastated,
Mm.
just devastated. But again, I decided to take a deep breath. I'm not
Mm.
saying I didn't feel any emotions. I'm
Yeah.
still sad,
Yeah.
but I feel the sadness. I'm aware of it. I understand the sadness is because I became attached to her.
Mm.
And ultimately in this life, our attachment causes us our most suffering.
Yeah.
And that attachment's part of the human condition. You know,
Yeah.
I've heard all sorts of gurus talk about getting over attachment. I don't know how to do it. I
Yeah.
just know that as I move through life and I navigate more of these events, the attachment doesn't devastate me quite as much.
Mm.
When I lose that thing, I get a little better at it.
But I think it's
And
also part of being human to feel that
yes,
attachment, you know, that emotional attachment. So yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've chosen to look at it, you know, in this way, in our slowing down and breaking it down for what it is. The reality is we spent a tremendous amount of time with her, lots
Mm.
of training. We feel that even though we don't understand the last physical altercation, ultimately there was some sibling rivalry going on in addition to her physical ailment. And we're both convinced, and the ranch is convinced, if she goes to a home where she's the only dog, that she'll do well.
Yeah.
They'll be careful who they foster her to. They'll make sure she's aware that she's had some aggression issues.
Yeah.
But we realized that this was it for us in her journey. We
Mm.
brought her to this point, and we've prepared her the best that we can. And the next family will absolutely reap the benefits of
Mm.
the months of work and love and
Yeah.
commitment that we put into Roxy's life. And so that's where we've left that for us now, is that we've taken her to this point, and now another person that she'll bond with will take her, you know, to some other point in her journey.
Yeah.
And yes, we're sad and we miss her,
Mhm.
but it's wonderful and it's blessed to be able to go through these events in life and
Mm.
no longer be just devastated by them, to feel like you're
Yeah.
coming undone over such a thing. Because
I
again,
think
there was
there's
a point in
also,
life where it would have devastated us. I'd have been
yeah,
just taken out by it.
I totally get that, because you do get so attached, and you also put a lot of emotion into, you know, fostering her and raising her, and trying to fix this and make it all work for you. And then, you know, you have to come to the conclusion that it's not going to work and have to say goodbye. It is like every goodbye is like, you know, losing somebody, and that's just what it is. But, you know, as you said, that detachment is a huge thing in this whole idea of what do I learn from it. And I think there's always these gifts, you know. What did you get from having her with you? What did you learn, and how much love and joy did you get out of that as well? um, I do want to talk about one more thing that kind of came up while talking to you as well, and that is the each step back to loving life can be fulfilling. And I think it takes it back to this idea of breaking things down. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I know you've got a lot to say about this, you know, how to
Yeah, you know, taking those steps again, you know, going back to the fact that we're a culture fixated on the end
yeah.
goal. It would be like if you're a major football fan, just ignoring the season and only watching the Super Bowl and
Mm.
missing all the fun games in
Oh,
between, right?
yeah.
All those things lead up to the Super Bowl.
Mm.
All the teams want to win the Super Bowl,
Mm.
but you'll notice that when they're interviewed, they'll always say one game at a time. We're only
Yeah.
thinking about next Sunday, and then the following Sunday they're thinking about next Sunday. And they know they want to get to the Super Bowl, but they've put that goal off to the side because
Mm.
they've got to win so many games. And then once they get to the playoffs, they've got to win them all. It's
Mm.
you lose one and you're out. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that's the way that we can look at life. You know, for me personally, I love mountain biking,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be involved in a race that's taking place in 3 weeks, but it's on hold because of current events.
Yeah.
Um, But if in order to get for that ready for a mountain biking race, which I don't care if I win, I just want to participate. If it just consisted of nothing but day after day grueling pedaling and pedaling and pedaling, maybe on a bike inside the house, it might be hard to find fun. But to get ready for a mountain biking race, you go out and do lots of mountain biking.
Mm.
And yes, I am preparing physically, and yes, I'm trying to increase my stamina, but I'm looking at the scenery as I'm out in nature. And that's
Mm.
why I like mountain biking as opposed to street
Yeah.
biking, because I'd rather look at
Yeah.
trees and rocks
Yeah.
and, river streams and things along those lines. And, to be able to then take that practice and bring it into every aspect of life,
Mm.
especially navigating from a starting point once an event has taken place that has caused a loss in your life, the loss of a loved one. Again, when I decided to go back to work so soon after, although it wasn't fun, I allowed myself to feel the accomplishment of it.
Yeah.
And I think we shared the last time that we talked that go figure, I'm back one day and a woman comes into my office to let me know that her son had
Yeah, I
disappeared,
remember.
and he was struggling with addiction. She was concerned as to whether or not he was still alive. And
Mm.
I had an opportunity then to speak to her and to help her navigate through that. And again, I allowed myself to feel good about the fact that I was able to help somebody else.
Mm.
And there was another step back to, the normalcy of my life.
Yeah.
Deciding to go to that retreat, difficult
Yeah.
as it was, I went, and I even took my guitar, and I
Oh,
thought it would be years before I would sing in front of
yeah.
anybody. And I chose to take that step, and I
Mm.
allowed myself to enjoy it. We sat
Yeah.
around the campfire and sang, and I allowed myself to enjoy that moment. But that moment was a step in the process
Mm.
of getting back and getting to
And it
even
must have been a
beyond where I
huge
was
step
before.
to allow yourself that. I remember, and I think I shared that before as well. I shared it many times in various interviews, that moment when I was standing in my kitchen and I sang for the first time. And I could feel how my voice was like really, there was no strength. I started singing and I kind of like, I felt like, and I had this moment of, no, do it, just do it, and just getting started. And even though it was like very weak and it was funny enough, that song Love Is in the Air, because that was a song that I sang so often and I was always quite, suitable for our relationship. And I remember when it first came up and I just started singing it and my voice just faded and I was like, wow, and I'm like, no, that was another fork in the road moment where I'm like, I can't just leave it or go with it, because again, this is choosing happiness over sadness, over the loss. And
Yeah.
I went with it. And yeah, so it was quite an important moment actually. And I guess it was the same for you when you sat around the fireplace with your guitar and you chose to do this. And how amazing does it feel when you do? It is
Yeah.
such a saying yes to life and saying yes to yourself, because whatever his path was in terms of my husband or in terms of your son or everybody else who has lost someone, you still have your life and you still can choose every single day whether you say yes to your life or whether you say yes to the suffering and stay stuck there. And we do have that choice, even if we don't sometimes feel like we don't, and even if we sometimes feel like it's easier to negate having that choice, but we do have it. And often it takes a reminder, like the two of us talking about it right now, and for whoever is watching this, hearing it, who needs to hear that right now, that we do have a choice to say yes to life.
Absolutely.
So, and
Absolutely.
for happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, choice. I started a little campaign a while back, did some videos online. I was calling it the superpower of choice. Of course, folks were confused. They thought I was having them consider if they could have a superpower, which one would they choose? But choice in and of itself, if you were to, at any given moment of any day, if all the limitless choices that you have would light up in front of you and you could just pick from them like candies at a candy store, we would see how incredible that is.
Yeah.
I could choose to end this conversation with you and go hug my wife or go take something to the neighbor knowing that he's stuck in his house. I mean, the choices are endless. They're really endless. And that's all part of that slowing down, because when you slow down, then you can see the choices light up. But when we're in a hurry and we're moving or we're
Yeah.
stationary for too long, it's difficult to see those things.
Or we have to
But just
focus
to
on the
take a
suffering
step.
for too long, because then we
Yeah.
don't see that, you know, whatever we focus on is what we see.
Yeah.
So that's a really big one.
And suffering definitely happens. It happens in loss to differing degrees. We certainly see people that seem to be able to get through it and doesn't look like they suffer at all. And there's nothing wrong with going through that, but there is always choice. It
Yeah.
just takes a little longer for some folks to be able to slow down and see that choice light up in front of them and realize, okay, there is a different step I can take now.
I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. I was hesitant whether I should or shouldn't bring this last question in, because as I said to you in our pre-chat, I'm very focused on not bringing the focus to what's going on around us in the world right now. I'd rather focus on the happiness and what we can do. Yet I still want to ask you this question, because there was also a question that came from outside in terms of how, with these physical restrictions that are put upon us at the moment, how do we cope with that when it comes to grief? And I actually absolutely love this quote that has been posted on so many groups and pages, where people say, like, it feels like Mother Earth has sent us to the room to think about what we've done. And I absolutely love this perspective, because I really see a lot of positive in this. I can't help but, because this is how my brain is trained. This is how my mindset works all the time. I know there's negative stuff around it. There's suffering, there's dying. I totally get that. I'm not negating that, yet I choose to focus on what the positive things are that come with that. And for me, there is a lot of slowing down, refocusing on what's really, really essential and important in our lives. And for me, there's a lot of, connecting more with the people I love around me. That, I had a couple of weeks where I felt quite disconnected from my own kids, which I didn't like. And there were so many circumstances that contributed to it. And I had my niece here from Austria for a couple of weeks, and had to try to get her on a repatriation flight when all of this, exploded around us. And there were so many things that completely distracted from me connecting with my kids. And now I'm like, oh my God, I love this. Sitting around our table, you should see this. There's a huge puzzle, 1,000 pieces, sitting, doing things like that, like, I don't know, just doing things as a family again, going to the beach, things that we've sort of done, but now that's all we have. And I absolutely love that. I see a lot of positive in that. How do you deal with the physical restrictions, how they call it? What do you do with it? Because I know there's
Yeah,
been on it. And
yeah, I like to be active, and I was definitely a little disappointed when they announced that they were ending the ski season early this year. And right away I'm thinking, but what if only one person gets on the lift at a time? There's 15 feet in between the chairs, right? I had it all thought out. I'm like, just close the lodge. The people don't have to hang out inside. Let us who don't need the facilities ski, right? But really, in the end, it comes back to that whole two things. This is our movie, and it feels like when someone is telling us to stay home, to shelter in place, to avoid doing the things we do on a normal basis, we feel like someone else is now writing the script to our movie. We are always the director and the producer and the starring role. We are always in control. And it just gives us an opportunity to write a different script for this moment. It's an incredible learning moment. I can't think of a better time in recent history for everybody to now slow down, to break things down, put things in writing. My number one suggestion to anybody at this point would be to get out pen and paper. If you are in a position where you really can't get out and practice distancing and do things in the outdoors, to sit down and put pen to paper and act as if though you're going to write your story out in book form and break it down and review the moments in your life that you feel like you need to take some time reviewing. I mean, there's just so many incredible things to do when we slow down, and it's a good thing. These types of things, just like when we lose a loved one, it helps us to be a little more grateful moving forward. This moment in history is going to have us hopefully be in a place of gratitude when we can move forward. And maybe Mother Earth has given us a timeout, and maybe we'll learn a lesson from this and move forward differently. And what an incredible blessing that will be to everybody, for us to see this, for the incredible, wonderful teaching moment, wonderful opportunity to slow down, because sometimes somebody has to pull the reins for us because we're just so busy.
I love that you say the teaching moment, because it is, there's something so potent around this, because it's a global teaching moment. Like, we all learn the same lesson at the same time, and obviously there are different lessons for all of us in this, but there's one lesson that we all learn about this slowing down. And also, you know, all these beautiful things that are happening, you know, dolphins coming to Venice again, and you know, water's clearing up, and in such a short amount of time, where we all thought or pretended that there's nothing we can do to reverse that, yet we all knew there was. And then all of a sudden this is forced upon us, and it's happening. And then in such a short amount of time, we see the effect that it has on nature. I think that is just magical, you know. And I also want to quickly share, Terry has written a couple of comments here where she said, I've just been crying tears of relief, joy and love while she was watching us. It's so beautiful, Terry, thank you. And she also says, Chris, I'm like that with the sea. So, you know, what you had to give up on in the ski season, Terry is in a mermaid club. She swims every single morning in the ocean, and does breath work, which is really, really beautiful. It's her coming back to self and being in the moment. And Terry, my mermaid. And yeah, so I think it's that whole allowing ourselves to learn, that is really huge. But yeah.
Now's the time to practice meditation, mindfulness, stillness. I love my skiing and mountain biking and the activity, but sometimes it's good to just be still. And what an incredible opportunity, because we're not in it alone. When each one of us loses a loved one, although we know that it's happening elsewhere in the world, this particular event, we know that it's happening everywhere to everyone. And so we're actually all in this together, and it's kind of cool. Right? It's an opportunity for all of us to be still. Just
we should all
slow down. And I love what I'm seeing. I see people reaching out and finding ways to be creative, to help each other. I have a lot of musician friends. I know there's no other way right now for them to make money. I've got some of them that I'm going to work with and help them get set up to do some online lessons and things, and find ways to stay busy, even if they're not going to generate.
That's what our guitar teacher did. She set up online lessons instead, you know. And I think it really requires us to become creative, you know. And I really love that is no like, oh, I can't do this. Well, you can either tell yourself I can't do this, or you can ask yourself the questions, how can I do that, you know. And I always think, like, as soon as you say how can I do that, it opens up, you know, ways for creativity and for things to come in. And I understand that certain things are a lot harder and trickier and more challenging to do online or in different ways, but I believe there's something you can do in every single situation in life, how to make this work for you. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, all that is left to say from me is thank you so much for another really, really great interview. I so enjoyed chatting to you about this. I love having your perspective on things. And I also, you know that a lot of people have really enjoyed getting a father's perspective in and a male perspective in this group, which is really, really beautiful to see how you deal with all of that. And I want to take this opportunity. I'm putting you on a spot now because we haven't talked about that.
Okay.
You know, I came up with this, I ran this past you already, and I came up with this idea. I want to create an International Love Legacy Day. And I chose the 12th of June for that because it's the day my husband passed, and I decided I want to create something positive around that day. And so this year will be the first time I'm celebrating this, and I really want to go global with that and have that as an international celebration day. And I call it a Love Legacy Day because I feel this can be a day where people can really celebrate their loved one's legacy. And I started brainstorming an idea of, 100 things how you could leave a legacy for your loved one. And on the spot, I came up with over 60 ideas. So I thought I'd really love to do that in a form of a Zoom gathering, because obviously we can't do this physically and in person right now. And it also helps doing it internationally, having people from all around the world come together. And
Sure.
I invited you to come along. It would be really nice to have you in that Zoom gathering. And
Sure.
also Jennifer Matthews, who was the very first person at Upswell Grief, and a couple of other people. Emily Maid, a positive psychologist. I invited some of my clients for all of us to come together in this Zoom meeting and really create and maybe also brainstorm how we can do this ongoing in terms of an international annual celebration. So I'd love for you to be part of that. And
Absolutely.
more details
Absolutely.
will follow along the way. But I just thought, while I've got you, I'm going to send a reminder out to the world that this is going to happen in June. And I'm more than happy for anyone to contribute ideas to that, how we can make this a really beautiful day and create something amazing out of what we've been dealt with. So any final words or anything that you want to say to wrap up this interview today, Chris?
I just would like to encourage anybody that's listening, wherever you're at in life, if you are in a place where you still feel the effects of loss, that again, every moment of every day is a moment where you have a choice. Every moment of every day is where you can, when you're ready, choose to take a step forward. And if you do, congratulations for taking that step.
Yeah.
Every single step that you take deserves congratulations, a trophy, a round of applause. Every one of those steps that you take back to loving the life that you live is spectacular. And if all you've done is taken one step, I applaud you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this wrap up. And I also want to bring back what you said at the very beginning, not just that we want to applaud you for doing that, but also allow yourself to feel that accomplishment that comes with that one step. That was so beautiful that you said that. So Terry, thank you. She says blessings to you both and everyone in here. Thank you everyone for watching. If you have any questions for me and or Chris, please post them in the comments below. We will come back to this post and have a look and make sure that we answer your questions or get back to your comments. And also, Chris, I'd like for you to please post your website in there so people can have a look at your blogs, and feel free to share that in the comments below so people can touch base with you if they want to and reach out to you. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and spending time with us and sharing your experience and your wisdom. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a beautiful day or evening wherever you are. This is Chris and Marie signing off. Bye for now.